Our first reading today is from Isaiah 55, verses 10 to 13. This is, Isaiah is one big long book, but it's basically three pieces. There's the first piece that is thought to have been written by maybe somebody named Isaiah. A second piece, which comes from quite a bit later, which would have been written probably by followers of somebody named Isaiah. And then there's this third piece on the end. And this is the end of the second piece, Deutero-Isaiah. And this is the last verses, near the end of the last verses of chapter 55. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return there until they have watered the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I propose, and succeed in the thing for which I sent it. For you shall go out in joy, and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn shall come up the cypress. Instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle, and it shall be to the Lord for a memorial, for an everlasting sign that shall not ever be cut off. And reading from the Gospel of Matthew, verses 1 to 9 and 18 to 23. This bothers me a little, and I'll talk more a little about this in a minute. But we're hearing verses 1 to 9 and 18 to 23 because those are the pieces that are the parable and Jesus' explanation of the parable. What's missing is this chunk in between, which is about something that I think is very much related to the parable, but not necessarily what the parable is all about. So here is the parable of the sower, according to Matthew. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched. And since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil, and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for that was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. And reading from Paul's letter to the Romans. Oh, Paul. It's more of the same. This is from Romans 8, verses 1 to 11. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and of death. For God has done what the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do. By sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and to deal with sin, he condemned sin in the flesh, so that the just requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. To set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. For this reason, the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. And those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you are not in the flesh. You are in the Spirit, since the Spirit of God dwells in you. Anyone who does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. But if Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. If the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also, through his Spirit, though his Spirit that dwells in you. First of all, let me just say that, especially anybody who's had to read from anything by, Romans before, you have to be really careful who you make eye contact with as you read and when, right? Because it's all about the flesh is sin and death, and the Spirit is life in Jesus. So if you look at the wrong person when you say, the flesh part, you got to be careful what you're saying and who you're saying it to. Which is kind of makes me wonder why then we have this parable with a chunk of the story missing. We have the parable. You heard the parable, and it's the only parable. The parable of the sower is the only one that Jesus explains, probably. There's some really good scholarship that suggests that whoever wrote the Gospel of Mark may have added the explanation, but it's the only one that appears in any of the Gospels, and it's in the three, Mark, Luke, and Matthew, and we get the parable, and here's what it means. Jesus says it means this. The thing is, there's a piece missing in between the parable and the explanation that you might not want to hear sometimes, because it's the piece that explains to me why he's telling the parable in the first place, which is that he's telling the explanation to the disciples because you won't get it. Here's the middle verses that are missing there. This is 10 to 17. So we just heard Jesus tell the parable, and he just said, "Let anyone with ears listen." Then the disciples came and asked him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He answered, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. The reason I speak to them in parables is that seeing they do not perceive, and hearing they do not listen, nor do they understand. With them indeed is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah that says, you will indeed listen, but never understand. And you will indeed look, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and their ears are hard of hearing. And they have shut their eyes, so that they may not look with their eyes and listen with their ears and understand with their heart and turn. But I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Wouldn't it be really easy to hear that as Jesus saying, you guys are special, the rest of them not so much? Right? The disciples, they're already followers. They've heard, they've understood enough to follow. Whether they've actually understood completely, remains to be seen, because you remember that whole thing about them running away when Jesus gets arrested and then hiding when he appears to them. Right? But for now, this appears to be Jesus saying, you guys will get it. But I'm telling this in parables to these people because they won't get it. Which kind of sounds like a really good justification for why you need me. Right? You need the person who's going to explain it to you. He didn't explain this parable to everybody. He just explained it to the disciples. So if you were in that crowd that day and you did not get that parable, you need one of the disciples to come and tell you what it means. It would be really easy to hear that, wouldn't it? You need me. And by the way, not only do you need me because I have the explanation, I have the right explanation. And that makes me super powerful and super influential, so you should do whatever I tell you. Let's pass the offering plate now. You can see where this would go. You can see where it would go. But does Jesus really mean that? Does he really mean that? He just told everyone this wonderful story and then said, listen, let anyone with ears hear. Wait, let me just clarify that. Let anyone with ears listen. What's the difference between listen and hear? Right? Generally, we understand the difference as, especially if you read a lot of Arthur Conan Doyle stories about Sherlock Holmes. There's a difference between listen and hear. You might hear something, but when you listen, you understand it. Right? Listen is the comprehension side of hear. And what's this parable about? It's about those that hear and those that don't. Isn't it? It's about the seed. The seed is the word of God. The seed is cast on the path and it's picked up by birds. Okay, that's you don't even hear that part. It just like it's snatched away before you can even hear it. Then there's a part about how it lands where it's rocky soil, so there's enough for it to grow, but then of course it withers away, right? That's people who actually heard it, but they didn't really listen, and they don't hang in there. Right? And then there's the seed falls amongst the weeds grow up, so you're overwhelmed with all that cool, great stuff in life that Paul loves to talk about and tell you how bad it is for you. Because having a good life apparently is sinful somehow. That's not exactly what he means, of course. But the weeds, that's the good things in life that suck you into life and choke out the spirit part, so you don't hear the word again. You heard it, you didn't listen. But good soil. Who wants to be good soil? Are we all good soil? We have a hymn in More Voices, actually, that goes, soil of God, you and I, right? Remember? We want to be the good soil, the soil of God. That's what this parable is all about, isn't it? How we should want to be the soil of God. Is it? I think maybe this much. I think it is maybe this much about how we should want to be the good soil. We should want to not only hear the word, we should listen, receive it. It should grow within us. And then we should share it with others. And how shall we share it with others? Well, not the way this sower did. I mean, if farmers, back me up on this. This guy's incompetent. Right? Don't you find the best land, the best soil, and then you put your seed there, because seed is valuable. It's expensive. You don't just throw it willy-nilly anywhere. You put it where it's going to do the most good. Not this sower. This sower throws it everywhere. And anywhere, in fact. So as farming goes, this guy's not very good. Or woman's not very good. Could be either. Except this sower is the best sower. Because this is the sower who, in all of the wonders of creation, whether it's the pathway, or whether it's the birds, or whether it's the weeds, assuming you can actually identify what a weed is, because I often have trouble, whether it's in the rocky soil, whether it's in the good soil, this sower somehow sees that there's potential there. And the word is for all. The word goes everywhere. This sower sees that somehow in each of these things there is a reason, there is a need to throw seed there, for the word to be present there. Is every day of your life good soil? Is it? Because if it is, I would love to have your life. But it's not, is it? There are moments in our lives where we are receptive, we listen, we're good at that. There's a moment of our lives where we don't want to hear what you have to say, don't even bother. There's moments in our lives where we are actually overwhelmed by what's going on in the world. It's not just the things that we're attracted to, it's the other parts of the world too, right, that overwhelm us. Sometimes we think we can handle it. We're good, we can handle this. Well, maybe not so much. And then we want to run away. The disciples discovered all of those in the course of knowing Jesus. And I think we discover those in our daily lives, those moments. So, obviously, then, God only is there for the good ones, right? Because you wouldn't want to waste anything unless it was a good moment that you were. Of course not. God is there for all of those moments. It's not even just a question of abundance and generosity. It's more than that. God is present in all moments of our lives, good and bad. Whether we want God to be there or not, whether we are raging because we think we want to ask, where is God? God is there. God is present. The seed is cast everywhere. So what are you going to do with that? How is that a model for us? Will we be casting seed only in the places where we think it's going to do some good? Will we be only giving of ourselves, whether that's ourselves in terms of time or talent or ability or generosity financially or otherwise? Will we only give to that for which we can see that there's going to be a quantifiable return? Or are we prepared to give to things where at first it might not look like we're going to get something back? Because we have to. We need to. We need to give to those moments. We need to give to those people. We need to give to those experiences in our lives. As fully to those things where it may not look like at first we're going to get something out of it, as to those moments where it might look like we would. And when I say get something out of it, I don't just mean get something out of it selfishly for ourselves. I mean, we need to be prepared to give in situations where we need to trust that others will do something good with it. Man, that's a challenge, isn't it? In fact, quite often, those kind of challenges are moments of either the pathway or rocky ground or the weeds. But that's how we're called to give. When I was, it's interesting that when I was sort of reading some back stuff on this, and then I thought, hey, I seem to recall I've written something about this before. And I wrote a thing for the column for the paper years ago in 2011 on the sower, the parable of the sower and the seed, and it was about Lyle Benke. And what I said about it was, not only was he a farmer and would have appreciated the metaphor of the sower, but he was somebody who gave from himself to all sorts of things. And it didn't necessarily have to be something he either liked or thought he could get something back from. He gave to things. Mel, too. I think of many people in this community who do that very thing. And and are great examples of the most incompetent sower ever if all you are intending to do is grow from one patch. But they don't. They give to other things. They give to things and to places where they maybe aren't sure they're going to get something back, or whether the desire to give is simply to give. Listen. Don't just hear. Seems to be what Jesus is saying to the disciples. But that's what the parable is about. It's about listening. It's about not only hearing the word, but being open to listening to it and making it live in us. That's the harvest part, is that it lives in us and we share us with others. That's best harvest ever.